I'm going to demonstrate how when I'm looking at material I begin to think in terms of which frame will get the children closer to the event. Now in the beginning, when you look at frame, people think I'm taking children away from the event. Like, how would you get them anywhere near the Good Samaritan if you were dealing with a hospice situation? As is written up in the material I handed out, you know, last time we met. Of course you would get very close to the Good Samaritan. You are actually wanting people to consider the nature of taking enormous risks, getting rid of prejudice and helping a seeming enemy and possibly being deeply in danger because of it. That's what the Good Samaritan might be about. So it doesn't matter which frame you choose, it's chosen to get nearer to it, not further away. The one they'll be furthest away on is frame number 1, where the children act out the story. They will never get into it that way. Not in 100 years. Not efficiently. But they could be into it just like that if they were running a hospice and choosing the low rule. So that's what I want to try to demonstrate. Now all my life I've been accused of taking children away from the real now events of the world because people don't hear the internal coherence of the journey one makes with them. Anyway, that's Saturday. According to how a person sees an event and how they feel part of an event, so they understand and think about the event. So if an event has occurred to you, and I say, how did you get on at the doctor's? That event has already happened to you. You are not going to act it out now. You are not at the doctor's. But somebody said, how did you get on at the doctor's? So you now reconstruct the event and explain it to me. So at that point, you are working at the frame distance of guide. You look at your chart. I was there. I saw it. I can tell you of it. This one. You are the guide. Right? So all you're thinking about the event frees you from having to demonstrate what you did when you were there. You don't have to show me what you did when you were there and feel it all again. What you can do is understand it differently because I've asked you about it. So, if children say, can we have a battle? And you know what they think of as a battle is standing up and pretending to hit one another, you know you're not going to get very near the truth. Because you know, A, you're not supposed to let them really hit one another, because that would be silly. For them to be able to conduct a battle, whether it's with bows and arrows, tomahawks, or modern British armory, it's virtually impossible to do that and feel it at the same time without ages and ages of deep consideration. But to set it up so that one says, and how was it? Then a person knows they have a spectator, and the spectator in themselves is remembering it. Not just remembering it and recalling it, but putting it together again. So their understanding and learning about the battle is of a different kind, a different nature, and a different degree of getting close to it. So if I say, And I'm benign in my saying, how was it at Scutari? Teach me how it was. The language we will find is, and there we lay. Show me how it was. We lay so, and our beds were the ground. And show me this woman and how she came round with her lamp. How was it? In the telling and the nature of my questions, children can get much, much closer to a consideration of how it was. Does that make a bit of sense to you? My questions are all benign. That is, I am not challenging them yet to go on, show me. I'm saying, teach me, who was not there, how it must have been for you. So I'm saying, and were you one of those who only could wear left boots when the ship came in? Only left boots. Then you get this amazing feeling. I don't know if you've seen that video of mine called Politics Tape. Has anybody seen it? I had to get a third-year group of boys, tricky kids, and they were dealing with the Minamata disaster, where the, eating the poisoned fish had created the nerve trouble in the fishery. By being guides, those children from the very beginning, you see, I would say, will you show me the problem now that your father cannot fish? And I will photograph it. And I will go to Chisholm and I will explain on your behalf. And you've got these boys demonstrating as guides, and you get this kind of thing. It's most moving when you see he has to lie like this. Lie down and show her, Dad. You see, you don't need to do it, but lie down and show her, Dad. And you see, we have to feed him, and you see these boys lifting and putting their arms around each other because they're telling me they don't feel stupid. They are guiding me to understand. Now my question must always go for the guide response. Does he feel pain, do you think? Not, does he feel the pain? Does he feel the pain, do you think? Well, yes. Yes, we think, don't we? He does. Don't you, Dad? You do feel the pain in your hand. Can he walk at all now? Could you teach me what I should say to Chiso when I show them this photograph? And so you get very, very close to the terrible family situation. Does that make sense? And it's in your language. Because it sounds calculated, it sounds cool, but in fact it's much closer than if they were acting out, discovering they've got the palsy or whatever they think this nerve disease is. Now if you take the second one, I'll have to put my specs on because I'm using a fairly small print in this language. The second one is, I have to reenact it. Not I choose to help you, but I have to, because I am the agent who will make people understand. Now, if you heard the terrible thing on the news the other day, when the woman in Baghdad screamed at the British reporter, "We are people, we are human," she said. She was in the event. The reporter was the guide to the event. But because he had a tape recorder, he could say, "This woman said this to me," and then he could play her. Because of modern technology, and children can do that. And they'll do it because it's from a tape recording they're doing it. They'll prepare a tape recording of it. Now, when you come to the agent, it is an authority figure who demands to know. Now, you see, if I go back to my minimata, the Chisso manager might at this point be the agent. Prove to me that what has happened to these families is to do with the effluent from my factory. If you want anything done about it, you'll have to be the agent of expression of it. So you don't necessarily have to be so helpful. And they will show you. Because you breed the will in them. Does that make a bit of sense? Now sometimes, of course, it might be done because it hasn't been clear so far as to what is happening in this situation. So an agent might come forward because he's trusted to explain it. A policeman is such an agent in court. When he offers evidence, he will have been there, but he isn't the guide because the court makes him be the agent. Does that make a bit of sense? They run in a bit close, but they are quite different in the way you have to think. So you see, the policeman who has to describe, he may have to describe a murder. As an agent, he can demonstrate it in all kinds of ways. He can use a blackboard, he can draw some blood stains, and it is demanded of him that he does it, not he willingly. So you see, if I say, how did you get on at the doctor's? I'm a benign questioner, and you do the rest. But if I'm a second opinion doctor, you're the agent. Well, tell me exactly. Now, I have the authority to make you go back over it in a totally different way than how did you get on with it. That makes sense, right? Is this too long-winded? Are you getting bored to tears with it? I apologise if you are. The third one, well, it's the fourth really, because I'm putting out the first one, is I am the authority. Now here, the authority can make you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So the authority figure has the power to penalise if necessary. And the authority is not saying you reconstruct the event for me. The authority is saying we must reconstruct this event. Now, an example of that might be after the Brighton bombing. I mean, I'm trying to choose the sorts of things where there'll be a lot of people at the moment. After the Brighton bombing, the authority figure may be saying, we have to reconstruct exactly who was in which room, where all the servants were, who knew who was in which room, where the registers were kept, because we have to somehow find out who got in, when they got in, and how they got the bombing. Because until we find this out, we can't start looking. You heard the same last week when the bomb was lobbed into the back of Downing Street. There your authority figures will reconstruct it because they have to before they can start to deal with the situation in any way. So they call in witnesses from all over and so on, which gives you enormous scope, and you can get terribly close to the event, you see. I mean, the terror of, if you have to act out the Brighton bombing, it's hopeless, because you can't fall down 7 floors and carry on. It's very difficult to demonstrate. But at the authority figure level, you can say, can you just walk down 28 steps, and we'll time it and see where he might have slipped in while you were doing that? It's terribly tense, It gets very, very exciting. Much more exciting than reenacting the event, you see. Because the spectator knows, I'm going down 28 steps, I know I did that, and I know out the corner of my eye there was somebody in a white coat, and I thought that they were a porter, but now I realise they may not have been. They may have been actually watching the room I went in. I mean, my hair's standing on end now, is yours? Just the very thought of it, because the spectator is awake in a very special way. And it's one, I mean, this one of the authority one is one of the most thrilling of difficult high school students. It really is. Incidentally, I gather somebody of you, I don't know who, tried to make a map and found it very difficult with the children. Was it one of you people? I know David said somebody tried it. And it was...
Dennis, when you were trying to make your...
Oh yes, I won't interrupt you now, but I'd love to hear about it. There must have been something that happened that...
Well, we didn't have all that much trouble with it.
Oh, right. I just thought...
Everybody's tried it, you know.
Oh, great. It's gone round the world.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Right,
Well,
I just
I'll tell you
happened
about
to
it
remember.
later.
Yes, yes, right. Now, the next one is the recorder. Now, the recorder is not reconstructing the event in order to do something else. The recorder is able to go back and say, would you say it again? Are you certain? Because what we write now will be read maybe in 100 years. So we must interpret it very, very carefully and record it thus and thus. So that allows you to go closer and closer and go back over it and have it again and again and again. I have an example of that with some Canadian children. I'll be dealing with it tomorrow in a little way, but these Canadian children had designed an air crash, and they'd done it entirely on flying over a forest in a helicopter and drawing all the broken trees so that they could actually see where the 707 Air Canada landed. So you've got a bit of a tail plane here, 2 seats out there, that tree snapped off, all the terrible raw wounds in the forest. Nobody could get out there because they'd chosen a very remote area of northern Canada, just on the borders of Alaska. So we flew over to record how we think the order of the experience must have been. So you've got somebody saying, take me over the tail again. No, it must have come off after the door because there's a piece of tree there that's some, and we were recording it for evidence. Later we would listen to the pilot's black box if we could find it. And our record of what we thought applied could then be checked against the black box, which we didn't have yet. You see what I mean? So there's an example of the recorder. So don't get the notion of a man in a black gown sitting there writing things very, very slowly forever, because it's not. It's totally active all the time. The next one is the press. Now this is quite different, because when we look at that event, we are recreating the event through us for the people we want to read it. So the press are doing a very creative thing, and they may not be necessarily dealing with it all. I mean, if we were the press flying over that air crash I've just mentioned, we would be creating a dialogue between ourselves and our audience. How to describe this for somebody who never saw it, but buys the paper that puts in these sorts of morbid details. Or the press who says, Air Canada isn't safe. This is the 4th crash this month. Something ought to be done. But when we were flying over to were recorded, we didn't have that feeling. We were neither for nor against. We were trying to identify. When a boy said, there's a woman's handbag down there, then we must check the passenger list later, because that may tell us something about where she was sitting. It's benign. It doesn't have an opinion. It looks at evidence. Okay? You can see how children's thinking, imagination and understanding is totally different. That's why it's such a wonderful tool. Because according to what you want them to perceive about an event, and how they will discuss it and explore it and involve themselves in it, creates totally different kinds of knowledge in them. And then we come to the researcher. I'm examining this in order to see where this fits the pattern of all such things. So you see, the researcher, if you take your Air Canada flight, may be looking into the nervous responses of flight staff and better training for them to deal with emergencies. Or the researcher may have 52 engines that have fallen apart in different parts of the world over the last 20 years, and he's seeking to put the pattern together. So the researcher's eye, when he flies over in a helicopter to look at the results of this crash, has all these comparisons to do. He's seeing whether anything is repeated. He's seeing if there are any unique features. He's not identifying with the people. Now, if, let me see who it would be. Yes. If a doctor flew over the air crash, he might be a guide, because the doctor might be saying, there definitely does seem to be a pattern in the way bodies fall because seats are facing the front. I examined all these people. All the bodies were brought in, and I interviewed all the people who survived. So I'm your guide, but I might do it through the medical interest. A priest might do it through the human interest, because he gave the last rites and is now comforting, or has comforted, other people. So he can guide people as to the help these people will need when they finally come out of hospital. You see what I mean? You are a different audience each time. Yes?
The doctor wasn't there.
No, the doctor wasn't there.
Specific thing about the
The doctor has been there. The guide has been there and has seen it and can describe something of what happened. But he needn't have been in the crash.
Right, so when it says I was there, it just means at the event, it doesn't have to be at the actual happening of the event.
He's been at some event, but he needn't have been at the crash itself. But he could have been at the picking up of the bodies, because that would be another event.
You're talking them through that event rather than...
That's right. The guide always talks about an event he's participated in,
Yeah.
or she participated in, you see. Yes, that's a very useful point you made, actually. Now, the critic has a point of view, of course. So what the critic does is interpret the event. Now, when my children in Canada dealt with the air crash, at one stage they were functioning as critics. Don't think of the critic as the person who criticises. Frequently they sound like that, but we're not discussing that. The critic interprets. So when my children in the Air Canada crash, which was their choice of material, they made envelopes. I gave them big envelopes and said, we know the passenger list because we'd invented it ourselves. will you take any one of the passengers, and in the envelopes tonight when you go home, put in the small shreds of bits and pieces we found that belong to them after the crash, that will be finally returned to their family. And you don't have to put the real objects in if you can't find what you want. Put in a symbolic object. So you see, if you say, well, there was a very expensive bottle of perfume and by a miracle it hadn't broken, they bought it duty free, then you simply draw an expensive bottle of perfume and I'll know that's what it is. So the children came back, me and I did one, everybody in the group did them, the teachers did them. We produced our 75 brown envelopes. 75 in the play. And then the children were asked to pick up any one that was not theirs. Now you see, at this point their function was critical. They sit themselves down, they open the envelopes, and they interpret what they think the person at that moment may have understood. I don't like the word felt. Understood. I remember this boy, he found a kidney donor card in his envelope, a half-written letter that said, I'm not coming home as early as I expected, Mother, because I have 1 or 2 appointments to keep. There was also what they called a bobby pin with a little bow of ribbon on it in this envelope. I remember just a few of the things. And half a picture, you know, the praying hands. There was half of it burned off. Now you see, he at this stage is a critic, because when we come to look at this evidence of how it must have been, and can we use this as evidence as to how these people may have responded? We're getting so near the aircraft. This boy, you see, is saying, well, I think she was in deep trouble because this kidney dialysis card is very new. And I think, you know, she's obviously been making a flight to start this life on dialysis. And this letter to her mother, she can't go home. That's terrible, he said. I said, I know. And those hands, well, maybe she was religious. Is there any evidence she was religious? Well, I don't see any, but you don't usually find. And then you see, he looks a bit further, and I remember now there were some dental appointments, and you know, she obviously looked after and carefully kept all her appointments. But you can't imagine anything so moving as we were all sitting here as this critic interpreting this lady. And they were all doing the same, and they were not all pathetic. I mean, 3 guys had discovered gold, and by they were going to grab a lot. And, you know, because they were all sitting together and they had rather foreign-sounding names, whoever built those 3 had built them up into a right team of scallywags, you know, with gold and drugs and this, that and the other. So they weren't all pathetic, but they were all terrible because they died. Now that's an example of how the critic would function in the event. And there was never so close an air crash as that, as people sat there taking these things out and building a life. Because then, you see, you could say quite naturally, I suppose from all this evidence we could actually put the 70 people into the plane. And we could almost know when the pilot said, this is a whiteout, something of what happened to them. And they were able to do it. And at that point, you see, they were not, I am in the event. They were still the critic, interpreting how it must have been. Does that make sense? So they haven't gone to stage 1, I am in the event, it is happening to me. Because that is not what they were. They were never in the crash. Ever. They were the ones who knew there'd been one. And then you come to the last one, of course, which is the artist who says, this event so interests and intrigues me, I will create another event from this. So your artist is the one who interprets in action, either in the same mode and says, okay, I'll do a movie of the crash. I'll use it as the basis of a movie. Or I'll paint it as a picture. Or I'll use it to do something about broken wings. And we'll deal with Icarus. Because it doesn't matter where you go, it's because you made a link with it. Now, that long explanation, I'm apologising for it, but at the same time, unless you pin it to action, it stays somewhere over there, and you can't make it work. At least I can't make it work. If it doesn't get into how does the thinking happen because you are using this kind of language and this kind of demonstration of the event. Does it make a bit of sense now? Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the Good Samaritan. And because I was confused and I didn't know who had what, you know the story of the Good Samaritan, so you don't need to worry about that. I'm going to very quickly give you 8 scenarios then, and just jot them down so that we can work on them today and tomorrow. Now the first one, obviously, you know what happened. A man was doing that and he fell among thieves and so on. That is number 1, I was there. It happened to me. Now the second one, that to me gets much closer, because, and I apologise to the full-timers, the Good Samaritan to me is a horrendous tale. It is so evil. To get the full horror of what it must have been like, and bearing in mind that the whole place was under the heel of Rome. But Roman soldiers were everywhere, supposedly keeping order around here. And these kinds of things could go on. And who would they sympathise with? And how would people see these Romans? So I chose as my guides shepherds who saw it and realised that their hut had been used by the thieves. And they have seen it and know they have been seeing it. And that is really scary. Because if you inadvertently see a murder, I mean, think of the book Smith. Alan Garfield's Smith. Smith saw a murder, do you remember? And was haunted even into Newgate. Imagine going into Newgate to hide from being killed. Well, these shepherds are in the same situation. They have found their hut has been invaded. They inadvertently see a man beaten and so on and robbed. And now they have been recognised. And men who do that to him and will use our few puny supplies and possibly kill one of our sheep will come back. So when their wives come and say, "Why are you not home?" they can tell it. They saw a priest and they saw a Levite, and they saw a Samaritan do this thing. But they know they were seen. and their lives won't be the same. Now, do you see why you get closer to the horror of it? But of course, I had to invent a scenario. I had to invent people who could be the guide. Who else would there be? The man couldn't be the guide, because he may never have seen the thieves who did it to him. He might be the guide to what happened to him, but only people from afar could see all of it. Does that make sense? And nobody was taken to an inn, because from high up here you can see it. But if you see it knowing you were seen, it's quite different in terms of the tension. So that was my first one, and that may be one that you're interested in. Now the second one is the agent. Now here you see, I seem to have removed it even more. But what we have here is that a crippled businessman has been mugged, and now he's crippled. He was mugged and is crippled, and he's asked to recall a time when he was mugged, because his rescuer is going to be presented with an award. So they are reenacting the event so that everybody can see this guy deserves this award. Like you get these people being given gold, whatever they are, I don't know, but you know, you get these awards. He's going to be presented with this bravery award on TV. So you see, they must reconstruct it in order to show that he deserves the bravery award. And so the agent in this case is the TV company that says, will you reconstruct it? And they're trying to get the most accurate and detailed picture of it. So of course the modern businessman will have to have exactly what happened in the Good Samaritan. Two people took no notice. And the guy that actually did help him has to be one you'd never have dreamed he would have done. Now, in my case, I was thinking, if you're a Northern Ireland thing, and you've got a Protestant helping a Catholic, there is an example of you'd never have expected him, the Samaritan, to do this to somebody that he's supposed to hate. The same would happen if you had a Palestinian, perhaps, helping an Israeli Jew, or vice versa. But there has to be precisely the same element, and he has to be taken not to a hospital, he has to be taken to an inn. And there has to be reasonableness in doing that. Now, of course, just who would do the rescuing and who'd be the hero, I would want the class to teach me. But they'd have to go as close to the Good Samaritan thing. He didn't take on just one robber, you know. He took on a fair number that could have come and thumped him and all, you see. So that would be my third one, that is the agent. Now the fourth one, I mean, you only just need to register. This is the TV's, the agency, and it's two apparent enemies. One has helped the other one, and is now getting an award. The authority here is that the shepherds and the herdsmen and their wives are summoned to the temple because the high priests in authority are going to stop these rumours being spread abroad that the priests of this sect are not helpful. And we have the power to shut you up. We have the power to summon you, and we have the power to punish you. You'll not sell any doves around here in future if this kind of thing goes on. God's will be done. And so you see, that to me is a way I can deal with authority. Now you see, shepherds who have to tell it to their wives as the guides are going to think about it totally differently and enact it totally differently than those who face authority, who have a vested interest in shutting it up. How do they elect what to do? Who stands up to it and says, it was like that, and I know the man? I can show you which of the priests passed by and did nothing. I am prepared to point the finger. Not only are there now some thieves after me, you know, one of the high priests now is after me, but I'm standing up for the truth. What of those who say, be quiet, Jacob? Say nothing. I'm not be quiet. It doesn't matter. The children will decide, of course, not me. Who dares do this? Now the next one is the recorder here. Just check this one. Now here we need the formal evidence for the recorder. There's been a fight at an inn where the Roman soldiers have been accused of not protecting the people properly. And this fight is being examined by the ecclesiastical court in the temple. Who started this fight and why? And the reason the fight began really was a deeply wounded man was brought in unto death nearly, and a tale told of some thieves, and somewhere around here there's a priest who did note, and there's a Levite who did note, and what are you bloody Roman soldiers supposed to be here for? And there's been a right fracas. So the centurion or whoever, the hoplite or whoever rank we want, is going to get this formally sorted, and they're all going to be confined to barracks. But some of these peasants are going to learn a lesson and all, that you don't do this to Roman soldiers. All right, you tell me he took his sword to you and he drove it in your arm. But I'm telling you, you better have a good explanation as to why he felt he had to do it. And so the recorder then would be the sort of authority figure that's going to get at the truth. And you get terribly close to the Good Samaritan, because it would be structured, and even should be telling, how did the man look? How do you know he was a Samaritan? Show me what he did. What marks did he wear that said he was a Samaritan? Was it the way he spoke? Who shouted the first insult? Where were you all sitting? Show me. Who shouted the first insult? I want the tone of voice. What do you say he said to you? Very well. Say it again so that I may record it. Was it so? And slowly the fight will build. Does that make sense? But it will never be people pretending to hit one another. Show me. Shall it be recorded then that you now recognise you misheard what he said? Is it your intention to change your mind on this matter? You see, and so you get deeper and deeper, and always back to the Samaritan. Why did he leave and only pay money? Did he know that none of you were Samaritans? What did you actually hear him say? Were they drachmas he handed over? Was it Greek? Was it Roman money? What sort of money did he pay him? Where is he? Where is the innkeeper? Come forward. Why did you take him in? Have any of you blood upon you from the wounds of this man as he was carried in? And so on and so on. terribly close because of the details they've done. I feel I'm boring you to death, but I don't know any way to do it quicker. Now we come to frame 6, the storyteller, the press. There are 4 different accounts needed, and 4 pressmen, if you like, storytellers, are coming to see the shepherds. The shepherds are fed up with people wanting to know what went on. They are trying to just forget the whole thing. They hope the thieves have forgotten what they looked like. And here are these various people keeping coming round, trying to sort it out. One is, I have to write an account of what happened to you, what you saw, in such a way that it pleases the authorities and they can say the case is closed. Another one says, come on mate. I'll bet they really laid into it, didn't they? Would you say that they were from such and such a place? Would you reckon they'd come up from Bethany? Oh, they're buggers, they're Bethany people. So somebody's going to write a deliberately biased account, and it's going to be spread across whatever paper you read, or you don't read, whichever it is, that really puts the blood and the thunder in. I suppose the news of the world on a Sunday, I don't know, but it's that sort of reporter of that, in that case. Another one is coming to try and get some action done. You know, there should be more troops along this road. Everybody knows this is dangerous. There should be far more law and order around here. So I'm going to tell this story to get some action. I'm going to have it talked of in Parliament. And the 4th one, well actually, I could do you a lot of good or harm if you go on telling this tale. I'm just warning you that I'm going to really blacken you next time I write about this. You might just copy me. I only need spread one small rumour about your sheep, or whatever, or fouling the temple, or not saying your prayers right. So you better be quiet about this. So the next time anybody comes to see you and wants your story and offers a bit of money or a couple of pints, I'm just warning you. You better be quiet, because I won't run you by the way I write about this. Now, any one of those would serve. All 4 of them would serve children who are interested in how news is dealt with. Because that would create very critical reading of articles. What's the bias? And each one is an intellectual exercise. How do you write the same event that the shepherds saw? Remember, it was never that the press saw it. The shepherds saw it, but they're biased in different ways. Another may be biased to turn them into heroes and say they all ought to have better houses and better conditions and so on. And then we can look for this sort of thing in the press anywhere. You can find it. You're nearly through. The next one, of course, is the researcher. Now here I'm using the hospice. Now here the children will be reading the Good Samaritan for themselves. They'll be researching the story. Now the hospice wishes to use the Good Samaritan episode in order to explain their own work. one of the things they can explain is they assist all who need sustenance and care. They have no bias against anybody, any nationality, any degrees of money and wealth, any kinds of illness, as long as they are sick unto death. All are welcome. There's your Samaritan bit. That giving assistance requires money, time, and loving care, which is what the Samaritan gave. And a place of safety and dedication at all times. And whatsoever you still require, when I come back, I will tell you. Is what the Samaritan said. So the hospice not only takes everybody in need, but they know that to help needs money, time, loving care, and dedication. And the third one, that anybody can be a good Samaritan if they choose. We welcome volunteers. So this one is that the hospice committee are seeking to use the story to write their appeal. Perhaps to open a new ward. Their appeal needn't be a book. Their appeal can be a radio broadcast. It can be the Sunday morning appeal on Radio 4. But in order to do it, they are scrutinizing the Good Samaritan, every word, to make the most of it, to ring bells when people see what they read, or hear what they're saying, or see in their movie. That is a really creative one to do. And of course it sounds as if it's miles away from the Good Samaritan. But it's terribly close. Because you can't write the book until you've understood the Good Samaritan. But writing the book from the hospice point of view creates the possibility of understanding the Good Samaritan, or penetrating the Good Samaritan. And then we come to the critic. And here we have an advertising firm. Now the advertising firm have prepared a programme regarding the hospice appeal, and it's aroused so much interest that it's been entered for a film award. So what we have here is the programme is being made. Come in, you poor benighted creatures. You must be very tired. You've not missed anything, actually. Well, in a way, they haven't, because you can tell them all about it, can't you, later? I'm just running through, just settle yourselves in and correct yourselves. The film is being seen, and various people are responding to the film, and they are, in their various ways, giving their impressions, their opinions, and their viewpoints of this effort. So in this case, the class would be taking up what the hospice class have done and showing it in some way, and then looking at it in terms of what is so good about what this film has done. We would interpret how cleverly it's put forward the Samaritan image for the hospice movement. Well, that's more complex to just describe, and it's a bit more complicated to set up. Don't worry that all you're doing now is breathing in, right? We'll sort it in a minute. So you see, somehow the programme has to be made to feel as if it's there. And that's why I'll probably in this case use a class's work beforehand of the programme about the hospice, and maybe the booklet. And the booklet then becomes the award programme. scrutinise it in order to interpret it and see what's so clever about it. Now, can you see there that the study of the Good Samaritan by that class is looking at the Good Samaritan in the biblical format, whichever version you choose, and then scrutinising how the hospice has utilised it well and interpreted it. Does that make sense? Right. And then the very last one is the artist. And in this particular case, I don't want you to think these are set, you know, like jelly. That these are the ones I invented, just to try and demonstrate it. What we have here is either an airport chapel, because remember, we've got to have journeys in it. A person has to be going somewhere from somewhere. Either that or a Channel Tunnel restaurant. I thought a Channel Tunnel restaurant might have been quite interesting. Because when I designed this, the Channel Tunnel was just being, you know, they were just cutting through that last little bit. So it's to do with travellers. And they've commissioned an artist, or they've launched a competition, it doesn't matter which, for a piece of sculpture, or a window, a stained glass window, or a painting, regarding travellers, caring and hospitality, based upon Luke's account of the Good Samaritan. Now you see, if people are sitting in a restaurant eating an underdone steak, do they want to be examining the painting of terrible raw wounds? You know, I mean, there's all sorts of choices to be made around here. You know, my steak looks just like his shoulder, oh my God. You know. But the whole thing has to be geared toward caringness, good hospitality, and we'll keep you safe. We'll feed you, rest you, nurture you, look after you. It's just a bit unfortunate that the story we picked has certain aspects that you better try and play down a bit. So that would be the artist. What would be your statue, your group figures, you know? If you were saying, I want that in the middle of my restaurant, I'm commissioning it, and I've got this idea the Good Samaritan might do it. We might say, well, you're not ready very carefully, but if you want peas setting on somebody just in the middle of our restaurant, okay. But which bit could you do as a group of figures and so on? Now that then is what frame is. Now it doesn't matter what your material is, you can frame it those ways. All of any material you find, you can frame those ways. The choice of frame depends entirely upon how you think that frame will best help the children get close to how the event must have been. And all of them will, except the first one, where they act it out.